Hey guys. So I was asking on Twitter recently if people wanted to see more reviews of certain things like TV shows and movies, and the response was pretty much yeah. So I kind of have the apartment to myself for a little while, and I thought I'd do some reviews. They'll probably all be going up today, but I mean, we'll see how that goes. The first one on the docket is one that came out last month, and I guess you're already watching the video, so you know that it is Wonder Woman. Right off the bat, before we even really get into it, obviously I'm a guy. There's certain social elements. There's certain aspects of the movie that obviously I'm not really all that qualified to talk about. And normally I wouldn't even bring that up at all, or I just wouldn't even get into the subject. But with the movie being Wonder Woman and there being a certain level of kind of how to describe it, I guess feminist progressive sort of ideas that are being pushed in the movie, especially with comparison to the time that it takes place. There's not a lot of ways to entirely avoid it, so I'm going to keep my commentary on that pretty light and brief. I certainly don't want to be pissing people off by mansplaining any of that stuff. So just want to get that out of the way right at the beginning. Assume that anything that is on those subjects just has a little invisible, in my opinion, at the end. And I'll try not to use the phrase every other sentence in this review. So, without further ado, Wonder Woman was good. Yeah, so the immediate response that a lot of people had coming out of the theater was that Wonder Woman... the overwhelming response that I've seen to this, I'm taking this off, it's like 100 degrees in here, to this movie is that Wonder Woman is amazing. It is wonderful. It is awesome. It is the best thing to happen in a long time. I disagree. I think it's a very... I think it's a very good step forward for DC. So if for some reason any of you out there aren't familiar with the backdrop of this movie, Wonder Woman is the fourth movie in the DC, I think, extended universe or cinematic extended universe. I don't remember if they've actually decided on like an official name for it yet, but you had Man of Steel, which was Superman's entry. You had Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice, which was the introduction of Batman as well as Wonder Woman, and we'll get into that too. The third was Suicide Squad, which kind of featured a good chunk of the Gotham like rogues gallery with a couple cameos from, I want to say, Batman and the Flash. So let's talk about Wonder Woman. Stars Gal Gadot. Gal Gadot, I think. It's like a kind of a hard end to that. As Diana, Princess of... I'm going to mispronounce all of these because I realized while watching the movie that the pronunciations that I always thought were correct were way off. Is it Themyscira? I always thought it was like Themyscira or something, but I guess it's Themyscira or something like that. I don't know. But she is the daughter of the Queen, Queen Horse, if we want to go into the Greek roots, I guess, of the name. And so we actually get to see a little bit of her as a kid. We get to see her in training, and then we get to see her off the island. As far as Gal Gadot goes, I thought that she was fine. I thought she played the character pretty well. Actually, in fact, for what it's worth, the one thing I can say that this movie did very well is that all of the acting seemed, to me anyway, to be spot on. All the actors had their characters down. Everyone seemed really into their roles. The directing of them was really good. The main issue I have is on the flip side is the directing of scenes and the directing of shots. I thought was a lot worse. Basically the Zack Snydering of the movie, which we'll get to as we move forward. We also got Chris Pine as Captain Steve. I almost said Scott as Steve Trevor. So he is a World War I spy. He is an American working with the British to foil the Axis powers. And primarily, so the for the bulk of the movie, so there's really, you have a situation where there's sort of a dual protagonist, dual antagonist situation. You have Diana, who is on a quest, she hears from Steve that the war to end all wars, the Great War, etc., is raging outside, which we now know as World War One, and she has decided that she has to defeat Ares, who she feels is responsible for humans destroying each other like this. Ares, the god of war. So she sets out with him on a quest to do that. He, meanwhile, is working on defeating basically the last real paragon of the Axis powers in the war, a slightly, not even slightly, a very refictionalized version of General Erich Ludendorff of the German forces. I don't actually know what the Germans call their armed forces and all of those. So it's him and his sort of assistant, not really assistant, his like scientific counterpart. He's more of the muscle and she's more of the brains. This is Isabelle Marou, aka Dr. Poison. So that's kind of the basic setup for this. And again, as far as the acting goes, I think the acting was pretty much fine across the board. Some of the details of it stood out a little bit. So I went with a lot of friends. Sarah was with me. Sarah was also of the opinion that Wonder Woman was good, not great. I think everybody else in the party that we went with, out of about like the better part of a dozen people, all were, yeah, it's the best thing and stuff, and we disagreed. But one thing that she noticed that I did not was that Gal Gadot herself was not very muscly, and not like we're necessarily looking for Wonder Woman to be just a bodybuilder physique or anything, but especially after, so you see a bit of her as a little girl, little child, and you see her as a teenager when she's training, I guess, and the age there is somewhat ambiguous. And actually, everything from the point where Gal Gadot steps in through to the end of the movie, it's a little ambiguous how old she is. But the implication seems to be that she's in her teens somewhere when she's training, and then she's a young adult, maybe like 20s possibly, but like not much further than that in the main plot of the movie. But she noticed that she had very little definition of the muscles. It was all very kind of model-y, basically, which was one of the early criticisms of the casting of Gal Gadot in the first place, that, you know, she looks more like a model than an athlete, which is sort of more the build that you would expect, at least a little bit, from Wonder Woman. That said, on the flip side of that, I thought it was pretty fantastic that the casting of the other Amazons were female athletes, primarily Olympian athletes. So you have these, you know, swimmers, divers, weightlifter, like all sorts of different builds, but they all had a lot of muscle, arms, legs. It wasn't necessarily like boom, but it was a decent amount of muscle, and it kind of gave credence to the idea that these were a tribe of warrior women who could fight off an invasion, which they do very early on when the Germans stormed the beaches of Themyscira, whatever the place was called, and they expectedly put up a really good fight. They're not used to guns, so that winds up being a bit of a problem. And then we have, you know, they ultimately survive the onslaught, but they do have casualties as a result. So one of the other aspects that I thought was a little bit strange is that we have, so I'm not a history buff in any real way, especially like I'm not, you know, World War I, you know, expert by any stretch, but here we have World War I, and I know near the end that the forces were all kind of dwindling and stuff, but the crux of the movie is an American with the Brits fighting the Germans. And it's never referred to as Axis powers. You never hear about, what are there two? Is it Italy? Oh God, I'm so bad at history, you guys. I forget what the third one is. Wow. World War I is definitely not my specialty, but, here we have, Italy was with the Allies in World War I. I don't even remember. I'm sorry. Point being, pretty much instantly in the movie, my brain went, oh, Nazis. And that's how I remember them. I didn't think of them as World War I German soldiers. My brain was fixated on Nazis because they were portrayed as cartoonishly villainous. Not the German army specifically, but Ludendorff and Dr. Poison are very, like, almost Bond level of cartoon in terms of like how they're acting and stuff. Actually, I take it back. Dr. Poison, very Bond-like villain. She has a facial deformity, that she has this kind of a jointed mask that she kind of keeps so that she has a face. I believe it was an accident with one of her experiments that did that to her. And then you have General Ludendorff, who has no real deformities, but he's a very like there is a point where they kill some of their own people with gas. It's a very special. So their big weapon is essentially a hyper strong and deadly not that it's not a deadly mustard gas, right? So a lot of mustard gas at the time, but this is one that would eat through materials, plastic, glass, metal, all sorts of things like that. So they're working on that. That's their big weapon. And they throw it into a room full of Germans that are saying like, hey, it's time for us to, this war we lost. Like we gotta, wave the white flag. Ludendorff says no, throws the gas in there, also throws a gas mask in. Dr. Poison watches and says, how come you threw the gas mask in? It's not going to do them any good. And he says, I know, but they don't know that. And they go, ha, 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 ha. And then they run away. And it's like, whoa, that was weird. Like it felt like a very strange moment where the rest of their characters are in no way like cackling evil genius. They're just like, look, we still have a chance to win this war, so we're going to try to do that. But that one scene just has him do this like cackling bad guy thing, and it just kind of stood out to me as being really strange, tonally and everything. So speaking of the bad guys, there's also another drug that Dr. Poison is working on that is sort of like it's hard to describe. So it's a little like pill kind of casing, and inside it contains. Essentially, it acts sort of like smelling salts, like you crack it open and you inhale, but the effect is that just an immediate burst of adrenaline, strength, agility. It's just this huge booster, and they had a really nice visual effect with that, which is sort of this kind of glowing, sickly, like lavender white glow under the skin. And the eyes would kind of turn a little blackish. So it almost looks like kind of a neon zombie kind of thing. It's not like the entire body. It's like this. It's actually pretty light. It's surprisingly subtle in a movie that doesn't really do subtle. There is a point, actually 2 points. There's a point really early on where he's not doing well. It's mentioned that the German army is essentially starving. They are losing the war and they have like nothing. So the German men have like nothing to eat. The German generals have nothing to eat. Everyone's basically starving to death. So she gives him a crack at this thing, and that's like, here to help your strength. And one thing I liked about what they did with this is that he's inhaling, and the effect is so immediate that he's still like inhaling, just like pushes through part of the table, I think, and just like he's walking around like someone for whom, like, if you were to imagine all of your muscles just kind of repetitively flexing and releasing, like not like quickly, but just sort of like very it's a lot of tension, I guess, and very pained sort of motions. He gets over it pretty quickly and is very like, yes, I love that. But I actually really liked how unflashy, unrefined, and almost a little clumsy it looks when he's under the effects of it. Like he's got suddenly so much strength that he doesn't actually know what to do with his body. I liked that a lot. I wish that it factored into the movie a tiny bit more. I think it only shows up one other time. So there's that. I'm just kind of bouncing around the plot. I feel like the World War I backdrop was not necessarily used to the best effect. Like they're on the Western Front, and it's mentioned that the two sides have been locked there for a year or 2 years or something like that. There's been no motion at all, primarily because on the German side they have machine guns, and on the French side they do not. So they are trying to, at this point, this is Wonder Woman, Steve, Trevor, and 3 other men that are kind of in the party, and they all have their own expertise and things like that. So they are kind of stuck there, and there's like, oh, what do we do? So she just goes, all right, we're just going to walk across. and she takes her shield and her sword and her lasso, and she just kind of walks across the battlefield. And they start shooting at her, and she kind of very casually just goes like ting, even though there is no realistic way. They never really. So the fight scenes they have featuring Wonder Woman show her to be very athletic, very agile, a very good response time, a lot of these. But the idea that you can look across an entire horizon and be able to see, oh, that guy's about to shoot at me, and just it's a very like ting, like it's done with almost no emotion on her face, and it's just like I don't know how the math or the timing on any of that's supposed to work. That's like I would have to be like, and the gun shoots, and like that's how that would work, and even then I think I'd still be getting shot in the face. It was a very strange shot, and especially like why would not like 100 people immediately start shooting? And then they get to their machine guns, and she pulls out her shield, and her shield is deflecting everything. Machine gun rounds in what, 1917, 1918, and it's happening like it's nothing. And then while this is happening, while she's distracting them, the other members of the party run across and aren't getting shot at even once. And then she just keeps on moving and eventually runs through the line. And I think she like stabs someone who is shooting a machine gun, and then the rest of the party goes, and then everybody storms the German side of the Western Front. It's just sort of like it's so casually done that it just feels weird and wrong. And like it's one of my real gripes with how DC's been handling their movies lately is that all of their characters feel perfect. And to Marvel's credit, one of their biggest things is that they give most, if not all, of their main protagonists very serious problems with their personality or some kind of a backdrop that gives them flaws. I don't really get into a lot of these DC movies because I don't want to just see two perfect super beings just duke it out for 2 hours. I want to see someone battle their inner demons. I want to see someone struggle with balancing their life versus being a superhero. I want to see someone have to make a tough decision about whether to save someone they love or someone that they need to survive, or it's, I just don't like that scene. Just felt really kind of stupid to me, and maybe I'm missing a level of almost satire to it, in that it's a similar trope that you've seen in a lot of action movies where, oh, here comes the one guy, usually it's a guy, who can just walk through it all like it's nothing. And this is Wonder Woman kind of flipping that and saying, here's the woman who can go through and just boom, this war is going to end, man. It was just a bad scene. I didn't like it. It didn't make a lot of sense to me. The other big thing that really stood out to me is probably the thing that they had struggled with the most in the production of the movie, and that is there was literally no way they were ever going to completely avoid the drawn parallels between Wonder Woman and Captain America. So it's a movie set in World War I, and it features the red, white, and blue star-spangled hero fighting the Germans. There was no way that the comparison between Wonder Woman and Captain America: The First Avenger was not going to happen. So they clearly were taking steps to try to curb that a little bit, but hilariously, they took so many incremental small steps to go the other way with it that it almost pulls in that exact comparison once again. So if I can remember how this goes here, we had Captain America in World War II, Wonder Woman, World War I, both sides fighting not the Germans themselves, but some sub-facet of the Germans with super weapons of some kind, with the intent of winning the war for themselves and saying fuck it to the Germans. So there's that. They, like before, red, white, and blue outfit, though Wonder Woman, I don't think, had any real white in her outfit. No, and historically, she has a very red up top, blue down below, some kind of like sometimes she's had stars on her like leotard, I guess. I don't really know. Sometimes she has like a skirt and there's like a star thing going on there. This time they actually did a really good job with her costume, I have to say. The costume she had was quite good. A lot of the props seemed pretty solid as well. The funniest thing to me about this movie was exactly none of the comedy scenes, which we'll get to in a minute. The funniest thing to me was when it came time to build up the party, you wound up with a cast that looked so specifically chosen so as to not overlap with the Captain America war party that like it immediately made me think, it's like they chose everything that was left over. So if I remember correctly, Captain America, he had himself and Bucky, who were two guys from New York. He had, I'm not going to remember any of their names, unfortunately. He had the Japanese guy. He had a Frenchman. He had, I think, another American. So I think Dum Dum Dugan is American. He might be British. I don't remember. I think he was American. I want to say he had a black guy as well. I don't remember any of their names except Dum Dum Dugan because he's got such a fucking ridiculous name. And I think that was it. I think that was the bulk of that party. So black, Japanese, French, English, American. In this one, we have Wonder Woman, who is herself Israeli. Gal Gadot is, but they don't have her as Israeli. If anything, she would, I guess, technically qualify as Greek if you have to nail it down to a real world country. But they have her as an Amazon. So there's that. But then there's also Scott. Steve. I keep going with Scott. I think because of Scott Trevorrow. I think that's why I'm mixing those up in my head. You have Steve Trevor, who is American, working with the Brits. Then you have their three party members. One is Scottish, specifically Scottish. You have one that is, I'm trying to remember what nationality he is. He has a fez. I almost want to say like maybe like Turkish or something. I don't entirely remember on that one. Middle Eastern, I guess that'd be kind of like an Eastern, Southeastern European, like Egyptian, like that kind of, I guess, Middle Eastern. And then you have a little bit later in, you have a Native American who also joins in with that. I guess there was something cut out of the movie where it was implied that he was not just a demigod of some kind, but he was the first man. That's not even in quotes, the first man, literally, like sculpted from the gods. But so it's almost like they took these nationalities specifically so that, I mean, with the exception of Steve Trevor, they took the nationalities specifically to be whatever was left over that Captain America's crew did not take. And it's not like a bad thing, but it almost seems so intentional that like it kind of just stood out to me a lot. I mentioned the comedy. I want to get into that for a second. This movie has jokes. Holy shit, and they're not horrendous ones either. That fucking stench of death shit. No, these are actual jokes. They have punchlines. They have stuff they're doing. My biggest problem with it is that they do not know how to end any of these jokes. Every single time a joke comes up, it's a very soft opening, and then suddenly we're in joke territory, and then the joke just kind of hangs around. Like it doesn't really ever go anywhere. Very little of it is like, you don't have any like smash cuts into the next thing that involve a joke. It's just kind of like the joke's there. Now we're getting kind of uncomfortable and we're out. And it just sort of like, it didn't really work for me. There's a really awkward joke about Steve Trevor's dick and repeated references to him being above average compared to other men because Wonder Woman just can't resist that dick, and she needs to know if other men have that kind of a dick. There's a couple other jokes that get sprinkled throughout, but they all have that same sort of like, they just kind of go for like a good 15 to 30 seconds longer than they should. And in a movie that's already a pretty decent length, you can afford to cut those off for brevity. A good joke doesn't need to like breathe after with more joke. A good joke should be able to just land and then, you know, give yourself an easy out and like let people kind of calm down while you're like transitioning to the next thing, or give them a whiplash where like something crazy happens right after that. But don't be like, hey, it's a really good joke. Hey, what about this one too? Yeah, that's all right. That's all right. Cool. That's pretty good. Yeah. And then there's that. Yeah, I guess that's kind of funny too. But yeah, it is still a step forward, which is good. But it just, I don't know. It didn't work for me that well. I think they still need to work on that stuff. But the problem is they've created such a grim, dark universe that, with the exception of like under their breath snark from Batman and Wonder Woman and probably overt jokes from Barry Allen in Justice League, I really don't think that they're going to be in a position to do a lot of good stuff with their newfound, you know, comedy chops. I'm glad that they have some. I just think that they started it with such a lead foot on kind of the grim tone that they're really going to have to fight to get out of there. So comedy, color, also another one where like they just can't seem to find a color that works in these movies. They have this fucking awful early 2000s video game gritty brown gray shit that is just everywhere in the first two movies and this one. Suicide Squad, ironically, is the one where like at the beginning of the movie it's all neon lights and crazy shit, and then when the movie actually starts it's cold blue, slate, gray, brown, mud, metal, dirt, whatever. This one at least has the benefit of it's World War I, it's a dirty, gross war, so yeah, there's going to be a lot of that, but like it just sucks the life out of you while you're watching it because you're just like, you want to walk up and just smudge the screen to get like, is there something on the lens? It bothered me a little bit. The very beginning of the movie on Themyscira is really bright, vivid colors. You can see what's going on. That part looked fantastic. It looked great, and I was very happy with how all of that was. The costuming was also really good. I don't know if I had already talked about that. The look for Wonder Woman outside, she has this very kind of like worn leather kind of a look to her, where it looks kind of like a hide. Like some kind of like a hide-based outfit, like leather metal kind of thing. And it works. I think so far it's probably the best looking costume they've done for the entire fucking DC thing that they're doing right now. All right, so I think I want to get slightly into spoiler territory. So if you go to that time right there, then we can get to the closing thoughts on this. Go to that if you want to avoid the spoilers. If you're good with spoilers, then let's keep this party rolling. Okay. I'm just going to jump right on into it. There are two big things that I thought were very weirdly handled in this movie. The first one is the mustard gas scene. There's a point where Ludendorff and Dr. Poison fire off like one round of this hyper gas. I don't think they ever actually named the gas. I don't remember them doing it anyway. They fired off into a village that the team had been staying the night before. And she runs in, and she's able to because I guess here we go. First major spoiler. She is a demigod. Like, she just flat out is a demigod. Zeus is her daddy. Queen Hippolyta is her mom. They had a thing while Zeus was dying, and then Zeus died. She's demigod. Anyway, she has no problem walking in and breathing in mustard gas. It doesn't affect her. Steve is trying to chase after her to stop her from running in. He can't go in because he's already hacking up stuff, just getting close to it. But she's in the village, and like, there's this yellow. It's like the first real color the movie has after they actually leave Themyscira, but it's this just yellow haze, And there's a lot of waist-up shots of her just turning and looking around and being like, no, 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 all these dead people, everyone's dead. And then you get like one shot of a guy from behind just laying there. You don't see any of the real effect of this on people other than like two corpses shot from behind. You don't see anything. And that's, I guess, to Zach and crew, that's fine. Like, that, I guess, is a really emotional, moving scene. Her swirling around in yellow gas so you can see literally nothing. I assume they did that on a soundstage, just somewhere. They probably didn't even have the village backdrop set up for it because, like, it's just fucking yellow gas. And it looked ridiculous. And it had zero impact to me because you don't see what she sees. She is seeing stuff. You're reacting to her emotion at seeing things. That's not... There's a very common, and I'm sure every person who has reviewed any movie ever has eventually dropped this line, but there's show, don't tell, right? The idea is, if I tell you about something, the emotional impact is minor. You go, oh, wow, that's really crazy. But if you see it for yourself, then it soaks in. You get to experience that, and you go like, whoa, holy shit. All right, so this is defying description a little bit. Like, it's the same as, really, in a lot of ways, reviews of movies themselves. I'm telling you about the movie, but unless you go to see it yourself, you're not going to know for sure if what I'm saying is true, if what I'm saying is adding to or lessening the quality, how your appreciation of the movie, right? So this movie suffered in a monstrous way right then and there of telling instead of showing. And the impact, it fell with such a thud. It just didn't feel like it was a who cares scene. And it didn't really do anything for me. Minor thing that bugged me is the various members of the team kind of have their specialties and stuff. And it's mentioned that the Scottish guy is a deadeye. He's a damn good shot, except I don't think he ever actually shoots anybody from long range with his sniper. And it gets mentioned early in the movie that he doesn't, like, he's lost it, like either he's lost his touch or he's like anxious and he just panics now. And he relaxes by singing. They have a cute little scene about singing, where he's like, well, I should go. I can't do anything. And Wonder Woman's like, but who will sing for us? And it's like, okay, but that's not relevant right now. There's no payoff to it. There's none. He doesn't like take this really crazy shot that saves the day. He's just there. He's just there. He doesn't factor in any important way in all of that. So that was weird. That bothered me. And then we have Ares, who from a million miles away, you can kind of tell by the language of what's going on in the scenes that Ludendorff is not Ares, which is what Wonder Woman suspects for most of the movie. But in fact, it is Sir Patrick Morgan, played by David Thewlis, I think. David Thewlis, yeah. So he is on the International War Council, who are trying to bring an end to World War I. But so Wonder Woman thinks that Ares is the one who caused this war. And he said, well, I mean, some of the ideas for weapons were mine. Some of the inspirations for things were slightly mine, but I didn't really do this. This was humanity fighting itself. There was no magical anything, no involvement like that. I just sat and watched, and this kind of happened. Which, from a villain side, is all right. I mean, it's different. The idealism of Wonder Woman is kind of in this weird, like, I never get to use this word, now I can, quixotic kind of way, where she is so blinded by I have to fight Ares that she goes and kills Ludendorff, then realizes that the war hasn't ended, and so Ares must be alive, and it's like so she thinks everyone's enchanted. Basically, she thinks that everyone's being controlled in some way by Ares to go to war, and then she finds out who the actual Ares is, and it's basically the guy in charge of the mission that they went there for. And the revelation is he wanted to get everyone together to sign a peace treaty so that could be bombed with the super mustard gas, so everyone dies and the war would just keep going and everyone would eventually kill themselves. He was weird. The reveal was weird. There was this fucking ridiculous shot of Ares being sent away from Olympus, and you see him on Earth with his armor broken by Zeus, and he looks up and he's got the fucking mustache, that fucking comb mustache. I honestly laughed out loud in the movie theater because it was so fucking silly. Here's a Greek god with this little mustache right here, no big deal, and like, they didn't want to give him like stubble, they didn't want to give him like a beard, nothing. No, we're just gonna give him the like early 20th century standard comb mustache thing. It was so fucking silly. And then, so the popular criticism that I have heard of the movie is that the first 2/3 are great and the last third is bad. And I agree that the last third is bad because what you have is Snyder Vision. The last fight scene is Wonder Woman being a god and Ares being a god, and he floats in the air and she throws tanks, and like, it's the same bullshit that we've been seeing since Man of Steel, and it's getting boring. The thing about a really good action movie or really good action scene is that stuff needs to feel like it matters. The tension needs to build. The action needs to increase and grow and get more crazy. If you have these perfect beings who just can bounce back from whatever, then it isn't investing. It's not interesting, and you don't feel like you're on the edge of your seat because why wouldn't they walk away from that? They can get a tank thrown at them and explode it with their brain, so who fucking cares? And, of course, the number one thing that I found really stupid about the ending of this movie is that we have Wonder Woman, a feminist icon, probably really the proto-feminist icon. I guess it would be, that'd be before Rosie the Riveter. So you've got in fiction anyway, I would say Wonder Woman is probably one of the first, if not the first. And the big thing that saves the day is love. If it wasn't for Steve Trevor blowing up himself and his plane full of bombs, then she just wouldn't have found the love in her heart for him, the man she's known for like a couple weeks, maybe a couple days in the span of the movie. And only with the power of love can she beat the god of war. She's a fucking Amazon warrior woman. Like, she's strong already. She don't need no man to be able to kick this guy's ass. And they don't present it as, what a noble sacrifice he just made up there. I have to fight so that his death won't be for nothing. It is explicitly played for a love thing. They have them sleep together like the day before, and that's really fucking forced in. They make stupid jokes about that really early in the movie. It really bothered me because it felt like it wasn't like demeaning, but it was very diminishing, I guess. It felt like she was only able to win because she loved a dude. I think that's kind of dumb. I think that's dumb, especially for Wonder Woman. It would be dumb in any other movie. It's really dumb here. Yeah. I think that's probably it for me on spoilers. Okay, so let's start to wrap it up. The movie, in my opinion, was good. It was better than... It's the best of the DC movies they've done so far, but that bar is so low that you can step over it. That should not indicate that this is just a crap movie that's better than worse crap movies. It is a good movie. It is decent. It has a lot of solid pieces. And if anything, I think the best thing about this movie, in the entire scope of things, is that it shows that, in my opinion, Warner Brothers and DC are listening. I think their reactions are not always the best ones, but I think they're starting to pay attention. Or maybe it's because now that they're in the fray for real, movie-wise, against Marvel, that they're noticing that Marvel is still kind of walking away with it right now. It's clear that they want to build up their own universe. The next one up is Justice League. I really still think it's kind of stupid the way that they're doing basically the backwards Avengers of here's Superman. Now here's Superman and Batman. Oh, by the way, Wonder Woman's here. Here's Wonder Woman and her story, also set as a flashback after the Batman Superman one needlessly. They didn't need to do that. They could have just had the movie entirely take place in the 1910s. And then here's Justice League, which features Batman and Wonder Woman and also Cyborg and the Flash and Aquaman. Oh, and then, but it's okay. You'll get their stories later. And it's like, I'm not interested in those guys if I don't know who they are. Okay, Arthur Curry, that's cool. I guess he's some Poseidon dude. Sarah thinks that there's a chance they're gonna roll with him actually being Poseidon or the son of Poseidon, or further linking into the kind of Greek god thing that's going on with that went on in Wonder Woman. I don't know. We will see how those go. I think Wonder Woman is a perfectly serviceable movie. I don't think it lived up to the hype that the movie was building up beforehand. I don't think it lives up to the hype that people are walking out of the theaters with now. I think the only circumstance in which I would watch the movie again is if I was watching all of the DC movies in the lead up to Justice League or Justice League 2, whatever, stuff they have down the line. I don't see myself watching it for fun again, unless so there's some kind of marathon-y thing that I would want to do. It's fine, but I do recommend going to see it. If you like Wonder Woman, you will probably like it quite a bit. If you like DC Comics, I'm a big Batman fan myself. I think that it is also pretty serviceable in that regard. The important thing here is, especially as someone who is apparently on the very minority side of opinions about the movie, is to go and see it for yourself. Obviously, way more people have walked out of the theater and loved it. And so just by randomly guessing, you who is watching this, there's a pretty decent chance you'll walk out loving it. It wasn't for me. I obviously don't have any of the personal experiences that would help me kind of latch on to some of the more feminist ideals and progressive kind of tones. They do set it in the backdrop of, because it's the 1910s in Britain for a good chunk of it, there's a lot of a sort of patriarchal tone to the city, which was, that's historically accurate. Wonder Woman asks Etta Candy, whose name probably could have been renamed. I know that that's her name in the comics, I guess, but really? A chubby woman called Etta Candy seems a little bit too on the nose for nowadays, especially for DC, where they don't really play up the silly side of things at all. But Diana asks, what the women do, and the answer is, we put on dresses, and there's a montage about putting on dresses, and it goes on for 3 times longer than it should, and they're taking forward steps. I don't appreciate the Zack Snyderization of the movie. The fight scenes, shit, I miss the fight scenes. Nothing reminded me more of 300 than the fight scenes, and that is to this movie's detriment. The fight scenes were boring to me in this movie. I had mentioned the action scenes a little bit in the spoilery section, but the spoiler-free thing is there's a lot of hand-to-hand combat, and there's a lot of punch, and it's no, that's not what good slow-mo is. It wasn't good slow-mo in 300, but at the very least with 300, that was the stylistic approach for that single movie. And if anything, I guess the idea with the continued use is that they're still trying to make it feel kind of comic booky with it, and it's just it doesn't work for me. It didn't feel right for those scenes. That's just me. So I did not like Wonder Woman all that much, but I would recommend seeing it. If for no other reason than the respect that is fine, that is frankly due for a at least decent female helmed superhero movie. All that has happened before are Elektra with not Jennifer Connelly. I've forgotten her name because the character of Elektra was fucking stupid in Daredevil and Elektra. Not a big fan of her on the TV show either, but that's beside the point. We had Elektra and Catwoman. Both of those were hot, steaming garbage. So once again, Wonder Woman has raised the bar above steaming garbage, but it's still raising the bar. So frankly, go see it. It's a far overdue movie for one of the most important characters in comic books. And I really wish Linda Carter was given a cameo somewhere in the movie, just as a little, tip of the hat kind of a thing. So that's just me. Yeah. So I think that's about it. Thank you for watching. And I guess we'll see how Justice League goes. Bye.